Before we dive in, I'd like to do an accountability check-in for the week. So this is something that I want to do when I started this podcast. And this week, my goals were to get in 5 runs, prioritize sleep and recovery, and keep exploring podcast ideas or like episode ideas. So, what went well for me this week? I managed 4 solid runs, but I also skipped 1 run to get more sleep, and I'm actually calling that a win. The highlight was a 10K fun run where I unexpectedly set a new personal record. So, what didn't go so well? I missed that 5th run, and I still wasn't as consistent with recovery as I wanted. And I also felt a bit too much in my head with content creation. And next week, I'll focus on balancing training with my day job, adding in strength work at the gym, and giving myself permission to rest when I need it. For this week's story, earlier this year, I was training for the Barcelona half marathon. So this was in February. I was running 5 to 6 times a week. I was chasing speed and determined to go under 2 hours, which I did. And during the race, especially in those final minutes, my legs and knees were telling me to stop. But I ignored them. I told myself, just push through, just prove that you can do it. And I did, no? Like I said. And I did. I finished it, but it came at the cost. In the weeks after Barcelona, I kept trying to run. First short distances, then a little longer. But no matter what I tried, the pain in my knee kept on coming back. At first, I thought, maybe it's just soreness, or maybe I just need to stretch more. So I kept pushing, but one day I realized I couldn't even finish a simple 5 kilometer run. And that was the wake up call. So that's when it hit me. In Barcelona, I hadn't just pushed myself, I had pushed too hard. I ignored my body signals, and now I was paying the price. And with the Madrid marathon coming up in April, a race I had already registered for, this was crushing. And I didn't know that it was quite expensive, so I already paid for it, and like the time to get a refund has passed, so I had no choice. And it was impossible, honestly. And I had been excited to level up to the full distance, but suddenly, even the smallest runs felt impossible. If I'm going to be honest, I was scared. What if I had damaged myself permanently? What if I couldn't run long distances again? And running had become more than just an exercise for me. So it was meditative, it was therapeutic, it was my new rhythm in life. And the idea of losing it felt like losing a part of myself. I finally went to the physiotherapist, and the advice was clear: stop running completely, focus on knee rehab, and give it time. So he told me you have to give it months, not weeks. And it was frustrating. Honestly, it was boring. And it felt like all my progress was slipping away. But I did the work. I had to. So, day after day, strengthening, stretching, doing the rehab exercises that didn't feel exciting at all. And here's the surprising part: after 5 or 6 months, when I took some time off running, when I finally came back, something amazing happened. In my very first 10K fun run, I set a new personal record. So after all that fear of losing my progress, I actually came back stronger, not weaker. And that experience changed the way I think about training and even about life. Rest hadn't set me back, and rest was exactly what I needed to move forward. And I'm a firm believer of journaling, and I journal about it. And here are 4 lessons that I learned regarding the power of rest. So the first lesson that I've learned is that if you push too hard, like there's a fine line between pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and pushing too hard. And What happened to me was the latter. So I pushed myself too hard. My body was basically telling me that, oh, we can't do this. But I was like, nah, we're fine. Let's keep the momentum going. So we were not fine. I finished, I achieved my goal, but I also signed up for months of no running. So I think the main principle that I see here is that growth happens when stress is followed by recovery. And without recovery, you're not growing, you're just breaking. And I think that is applicable to this. And it's the same outside of running. At work, if you're always grinding at 110%, you don't get promoted to superhuman. You just burn out. In relationships, if you never pause, you end up resentful. So, my takeaway here is to listen before it gets loud. Listen to your body before it gets loud, because I didn't. And your body and mind whisper before they scream. And trust me, the screaming part is not fun. So after I finished that half marathon, I felt it in my knees, I felt it in my necks, like my body was just screaming at me. And it was whispering like the last 10-15 minutes of the run. All right, let's move on to the second lesson I learned. So, and I think this is the biggest lesson that I learned, that rest isn't the biggest lesson that I learned is that rest isn't the opposite of work. Rest is the work. Rest is part of the work, and rest is the work. So I used to think resting was being lazy, but rehab taught me otherwise. So those boring little knee exercises, that was the work that I had to do. My muscles weren't rebuilding when I was pounding the pavement. They were rebuilding when I was lying on the floor, when I was stretching bands, and wondering if this would ever end. And I think the principle here is that recovery is what turns effort into progress. And effort without recovery, it just drains you. And I think that an application of this in life is how often our best ideas in life comes to us when we're resting, when we're chilling, no, when we're in the shower, or when we're on a walk. And that's recovery at work. And actually, like the idea for this episode, I realized about it after I finished my run. I was walking from the park to my house, and I figured like, oh, why not talk about that stupid decision that I made a few months ago. So my main takeaway for this lesson is that don't just measure what you're doing, measure how you're also recovering. And I think even Netflix counts sometimes. So keyword there is sometimes, because things in moderation, they're good. So I've watched more TV series episodes, I would say, more animes, and I've read more books during that time. So it wasn't really like a bad time for me. All right, next lesson. So the next lesson is a tired mind looks for relief and not clarity. So this one hit me. When I was injured, I wasn't resting. I was numbing. I was scrolling at times. I was snacking, binging random YouTube rabbit holes. I wasn't finding answer, and I was just distracting myself. So this was also a part of the recovery period for me. And I guess like in the early stages, I felt that I was exhausted from doing everything. But the thing is, when you're exhausted, your brain doesn't want wisdom. It just wants comfort. But the hard truth to swallow is that comfort doesn't solve problems. So that, oh, just one more task moment that ends with you doom scrolling until 1 a.m., that is what relief looks like. And it's not clarity. So for me, protecting rest is also part of the work. So it's not just that you end with rest, no, doing the rest, but you also have to protect it so you don't confuse relief with clarity. And clarity requires energy. So it's very important to keep that in mind. And I noticed this like after a few weeks of like just doom scrolling because I had no choice. Like after doing the exercises, I just have to like stay home. But it's very important to know the differences between what relief is and what clarity is. And the fourth and final lesson for me was that in running, rest builds stronger muscles. In life, rest builds resilience. And here's the plot twist. After months of rehab, I didn't come back weaker. I came back stronger. So, first race back, new personal record. And that's when it hit me that rest isn't the enemy of progress, it's the partner of it. So, and that rest isn't passive as well. So, it's your body and mind actively rebuilding. So, like just learning rest, how important it is. It took me like this important lesson. And I realized that taking a weekend off doesn't make you lazy. And when it comes to a relationship, taking a break in a relationship doesn't mean it's failing. So breaks are what gives you perspective and staying power, and it's what gives you clarity. And sometimes the bravest thing isn't grinding harder, doing things harder. It's stepping back long enough to let growth catch up. And like what happened to me, my niece thanked me for it. I felt So this podcast is a 100 episode experiment about showing up for yourself and learning together. And sometimes showing up means resting. And rest isn't laziness. It's part of the progress, it's part of the job, and it's part of the work. It feels like stopping, but it's often one of the ways to help us move forward. And if you've had a moment where rest made you stronger, whether in fitness, work, or just life, I'd love to hear your story. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the Self Designed Path. See you next time. Bye.